there is something deeply unsettling about the liquid in your glass right now. For thousands of years, across the entire African continent, people rarely drank plain water. Instead, they consumed fermented beverages made from sorghum, millet, palm sap, and honey, not because they were alcoholics, not because they lacked access to clean water, but because these drinks kept them alive, healthy, and thriving in ways that modern beverages never could. In ancient Egypt, workers building the pyramids received a daily ration of beer, not as a treat, but as essential nutrition. In the Kingdom of Kush, soldiers marched on fermented sorghum beer that provided calories, vitamins, and hydration simultaneously. Across West Africa, palm wine was consumed from morning to night, sustaining entire communities through agricultural labor, warfare, and childbirth. Fast forward to today, we drink sodas loaded with 40 grams of sugar, energy drinks packed with synthetic caffeine and chemicals you can't pronounce, bottled water stripped of minerals and sold back to us at 1,000 times the cost, and we're sicker than ever. Obesity affects 40% of adults. Type 2 diabetes is an epidemic. Gut health is collapsing, with irritable bowel syndrome affecting 1 in 7 people. Your great-grandmother in Accra or Kinshasa drank palm wine daily and lived to 90 without diabetes, without obesity, without the chronic inflammation that plagues modern society. So, what the hell changed? The answer isn't that ancient Africans had superior genetics. The answer is that fermented drinks provided complete nutrition, beneficial bacteria, and safe hydration in one package. And the beverage industry selling you sugar water and chemical cocktails desperately needs you to forget this ancient wisdom. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment. Have you ever tried traditional African fermented drinks? Palm wine, pito, tej? Let us know, because what you're about to discover will transform how you think about every beverage you consume. Here's what they don't teach you in school. For most of human history, water wasn't safe to drink. Rivers carried parasites, wells harbored bacteria. Stagnant water bred disease, cholera, dysentery, typhoid. These killers came from contaminated water sources. Ancient Africans understood this instinctively. They observed that people who drank untreated water got sick. People who drank fermented beverages stayed healthy. The fermentation process was biological warfare against pathogens. When you ferment grain or palm sap, wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria take over. They consume sugars and produce alcohol, lactic acid, and acetic acid. These compounds create an acidic environment where harmful bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella cannot survive. A jar of fermenting sorghum beer at pH 4 to 4.5 is a hostile environment for pathogens, but a paradise for beneficial microbes. Ancient Africans didn't know about pH levels or microbiology, but they knew fermented drinks didn't make people sick. Plain water did, so fermented beverages became the default drink for adults and children alike. But it wasn't just about safety. Fermented drinks provided nutrition that water never could. Sorghum beer, known as pito in West Africa, contains B vitamins including thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and folic acid. These vitamins support energy production, nervous system function, and red blood cell formation. It contains essential amino acids, making it a source of protein. It provides minerals like magnesium, phosphorus, and iron. Compare that to modern bottled water, which contains virtually nothing. No vitamins, no minerals, just H2O, often stripped even of the trace minerals that natural spring water contains. Or compare it to soda, which provides 200 empty calories of sugar and zero nutrition. Ancient fermented drinks were liquid food, hydration, plus complete nutrition in every cup. In regions where food was scarce, these drinks kept people alive in times of drought. Fermented millet or sorghum beer sustained communities when solid food ran out. This wasn't recreational drinking. This was survival technology perfected over thousands of years. Modern science is obsessed with probiotics. You can buy them in pills, powders, and yogurts for $30 a bottle. But ancient Africans were consuming probiotics in quantities that would shock a modern gastroenterologist, and they were doing it for free. Traditional African fermented drinks contain billions of beneficial bacteria per serving. Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, Leuconostoc, these are the same strains sold in expensive probiotic supplements today. A single cup of traditionally fermented palm wine contains more live probiotics than an entire bottle of kombucha. These bacteria don't just survive in your gut, they colonize it, outcompeting harmful bacteria and producing compounds that strengthen your immune system. Research from the University of Ghana analyzed traditional pedo and found over 20 strains of lactic acid bacteria, each contributing different health benefits. Some strains produce bacteriocins, natural antibiotics that kill pathogenic bacteria. Others produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which reduce inflammation and protect against colon cancer. Still others synthesize vitamins, particularly B12 and K2, right in your digestive tract. Ancient Africans drinking fermented sorghum beer weren't just hydrating. They were inoculating their guts with a diverse ecosystem of beneficial microbes that regulated digestion, boosted immunity, and even influenced mood and mental health through the gut-brain axis. Modern research confirms what traditional societies knew instinctively. A study published in Nutrients found that regular consumption of fermented beverages improved gut microbiome diversity, reduced markers of inflammation, and enhanced immune function. Another study from Kenya showed that children who consumed traditional fermented porridge had lower rates of diarrheal disease compared to children drinking boiled water or commercial juices. The probiotics provided protection that modern sanitation alone couldn't match. But here's the tragedy. These traditional drinks are disappearing, replaced by Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Fanta, replaced by beverages that actively harm gut health, feed pathogenic bacteria, and promote chronic disease. The beverage industry convinced Africa that traditional fermented drinks were backwards, dirty, shameful. The result? Skyrocketing rates of metabolic disease in populations that thrived for millennia on fermented beverages. Let's talk specifics because each region of Africa developed its own fermented beverages perfectly adapted to local grains and conditions. In West Africa, pedo reigned supreme. Made from fermented sorghum or millet, pedo was consumed daily by men, women, and children. The production process took 2 to 3 days. Grain was soaked, germinated to activate enzymes, dried, then ground into flour. This flour was mixed with water and left to ferment with wild yeasts and bacteria. The result was a slightly sour, mildly alcoholic beverage with a thick porridge-like consistency. Rich in calories, protein, and B vitamins, pedo sustained farmers working 12-hour days in the fields. It was given to pregnant women to prevent anemia. It was fed to children to support growth. In Ethiopia and Eritrea, tej was the drink of choice. Made from fermented honey, water, and gesho, a local bittering agent, tej is often called honey wine. But it's far more than that. The fermentation process transforms simple honey into a complex beverage loaded with antioxidants, enzymes, and probiotics. Tej was consumed at every social gathering, religious ceremony, and family meal. Ethiopian warriors drank it before battle. Priests consumed it during religious rites. And ordinary people drank it daily because it provided energy, nutrition, and medicinal benefits all in one. In Central and Southern Africa, palm wine was king. Tapped from oil palms, raffia palms, or coconut palms, the sap was collected and allowed to ferment naturally. Within hours, wild yeasts began working. Within 24 hours, you had a sweet, effervescent beverage with low alcohol content. Palm wine is incredibly rich in nutrients. It contains vitamin C, B vitamins, amino acids, and minerals like potassium and magnesium. Studies have shown it has antioxidant properties that protect against cellular damage. Fresh palm wine consumed within a day of tapping is probiotic-rich and easily digestible. It was given to nursing, mothers to increase milk production, to the elderly for strength, and to laborers for sustained energy. These weren't recreational beverages, they were functional foods that kept entire civilizations healthy and productive. Modern nutritionists are finally analyzing what ancient Africans drank, and the results are staggering. A study from the University of Pretoria analyzed traditional sorghum beer and found it contained significant amounts of thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and pyridoxine. These B vitamins are essential for converting food into energy, maintaining healthy skin and eyes, and supporting brain function. 1 liter of traditional sorghum beer provides 30 to 50% of your daily B vitamin requirements. Compare that to modern beer, which has been filtered and pasteurized, stripping away most nutrients. Industrial beer provides empty calories and virtually no nutrition. Traditional African beer provided calories plus vitamins, minerals, protein, and probiotics. Then there's the amino acid profile. Fermentation breaks down grain proteins into free amino acids that your body can absorb immediately. Traditional pedo contains lysine, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, essential amino acids that support muscle growth and repair. This made fermented drinks especially valuable for people doing hard physical labor. You weren't just drinking liquid, you were consuming bioavailable protein. The mineral content is equally impressive. Traditional fermented drinks contain iron, which prevents anemia, magnesium, which regulates blood pressure and supports bone health, phosphorus for strong teeth and bones, potassium for heart function, and zinc, critical for immune function and wound healing. Modern sports drinks claim to replace electrolytes, but they contain synthetic minerals in tiny amounts, plus massive doses of sugar. Ancient African fermented drinks provided natural, bioavailable minerals in a form your body actually recognizes and absorbs. But here's where it gets really interesting. The fermentation process creates unique compounds not found in the original grain. Organic acids like lactic acid improve calcium absorption. Enzymes like amylase predigest starches, making them easier on your digestive system. Peptides with antimicrobial properties protect against infections, and antioxidants that combat oxidative stress and reduce inflammation. A study published in the Journal of Food Science found that traditionally fermented sorghum beer had antioxidant activity comparable to red wine, the darling of Western health media. But nobody's writing articles about African beer because it doesn't fit the narrative that Western foods are superior. The destruction of traditional African drinking culture didn't happen by accident. It was systematic, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. European colonizers arrived with their own beverages, beer, wine, spirits, and they viewed African fermented drinks with contempt. Missionary reports from the 1800s are filled with disgust at Africans drinking palm wine and sorghum beer. They called it primitive, unhygienic evidence of moral degeneracy. Colonial administrators passed laws restricting traditional brewing. They taxed local beverages heavily while allowing European alcohol to flow freely. The message was clear. African drinks were inferior, shameful, backwards. European beverages were civilized, modern, superior. This wasn't about health or safety. This was cultural annihilation designed to create dependence on European imports. Post-independence, the assault continued through different means. Coca-Cola and Pepsi entered African markets aggressively, marketing their products as symbols of modernity and progress. Drinking Coke meant you were sophisticated, worldly, successful. Drinking traditional palm wine meant you were poor, rural, stuck in the past. Governments, influenced by Western nutritional guidelines, began promoting boiled water and commercial beverages over traditional fermented drinks. Public health campaigns warned against alcohol without distinguishing between traditional low-alcohol fermented drinks and high-proof distilled spirits. Schools taught children that traditional drinks were dangerous. Urban elites abandoned them entirely, embracing soft drinks and bottled water as status symbols. The result was catastrophic. In Ghana, pedo consumption dropped by over 60% between 1970 and 2010. In Nigeria, palm wine went from being a daily staple to an occasional rural indulgence. In Ethiopia, tej became associated with older generations while young people flocked to Western sodas and energy drinks. And as traditional drinks disappeared, chronic diseases exploded. Type 2 diabetes, virtually unknown in traditional African societies, became epidemic in urban areas. Obesity rates tripled. Metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, and inflammatory bowel disorders appeared in populations that had thrived for millennia. The timeline is undeniable. As traditional fermented drinks disappeared, health collapsed. Correlation isn't always causation, but in this case, the evidence is overwhelming. Let's talk about what replaced traditional fermented drinks, because this is where the beverage industry's crimes become crystal clear. Coca-Cola contains 39 grams of sugar per can. That's 10 teaspoons. It provides zero nutrition, just empty calories that spike your blood sugar, trigger insulin release, and promote fat storage. The phosphoric acid it contains actually leaches calcium from your bones. The caffeine dehydrates you, and the artificial ingredients disrupt your gut microbiome, killing beneficial bacteria and allowing harmful strains to flourish. Compare that to traditional palm wine, which contains natural sugars from the palm sap, balanced by probiotics, vitamins, and minerals. The alcohol content is low, typically 2 to 4%, less than modern beer. And because it's consumed fresh, it provides live enzymes and bacteria that support digestion, but people stopped drinking palm wine and started drinking Coke. The result? Obesity rates in urban Africa have increased by 300% since 1980. In South Africa, nearly 70% of women are now overweight or obese. In Egypt, diabetes affects over 15% of adults. These diseases were almost non-existent when traditional beverages dominated. Then there are energy drinks. Red Bull, Monster, and their imitators contain massive doses of synthetic caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins in forms your body struggles to process. They provide a short-term energy spike followed by a crash that leaves you more exhausted than before. They're linked to heart palpitations, anxiety, and sleep disorders. Ancient Africans didn't need energy drinks. They had teji, pito, and palm wine, beverages that provided sustained energy from natural sugars, B vitamins from fermentation, and hydration without the toxic chemical load. Even bottled water is a downgrade. Most commercial water is stripped of minerals through reverse osmosis, then sold back to you in plastic bottles that leach endocrine disruptors into the liquid. Spring water naturally contains calcium, magnesium, and trace minerals that support health. But modern processing removes them. Ancient fermented drinks provided hydration plus nutrition. Modern beverages provide hydration minus everything valuable, often plus harmful ingredients. The beverage industry convinced the world that progress meant abandoning traditional drinks. The result is the worst public health crisis in human history. Modern research is finally validating what ancient Africans knew through observation and experience. A study from the University of Nairobi examined traditional fermented beverages across Kenya and found they contained probiotic strains that significantly reduced the incidence of diarrheal diseases in children. Another study, this one from Burkina Faso, showed that regular consumption of traditional millet beer improved nutritional status in malnourished populations, providing essential amino acids and B vitamins that were lacking in their diets. Researchers at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria analyzed palm wine and discovered it contained antioxidants called phenolic compounds that protect against oxidative stress and reduce inflammation. These compounds are linked to lower rates of cardiovascular disease and cancer. In Ethiopia, scientists studying teje found that the fermentation process created unique peptides with antimicrobial properties, essentially natural antibiotics that protect against infections. A groundbreaking study published in Food Microbiology compared gut microbiomes of people who consumed traditional fermented beverages regularly versus those who drank only boiled water or commercial soft drinks. The fermented beverage group had significantly higher microbiome diversity, more beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, and lower levels of inflammatory markers. Their immune systems were stronger, their digestion was better, and they reported fewer incidents of common illnesses like colds and flu. Even more compelling, researchers in rural Tanzania studied communities that still consume traditional fermented drinks daily. Despite living in conditions that modern hygienists would consider unsanitary, these populations had remarkably low rates of chronic disease. Diabetes was virtually non-existent. Obesity was rare. Autoimmune disorders were unknown. When researchers compared these groups to urban Tanzanians drinking Coke and Fanta, the differences were stark. Urban populations had diabetes rates 15 times higher. Obesity rates were 10 times higher. The rural groups drinking traditional fermented beverages were healthier by every measurable metric. The science is no longer debatable. Traditional African fermented drinks weren't just safe. They were actively health-promoting in ways that modern beverages, even so-called healthy ones, cannot match. Every study confirms it. Ancient wisdom was superior to modern marketing. If you want to experience the health benefits ancient Africans took for granted, you have options. First, seek out traditional fermented drinks in African communities or specialty stores. Palm wine is harder to find outside Africa due to its short shelf life, but tej is increasingly available in Ethiopian restaurants and stores. Peto can sometimes be found at West African markets. These drinks are alive, unpasteurized, and packed with probiotics. Consume them fresh for maximum benefit. Second, learn to make them yourself. Traditional recipes are simple. For a basic sorghum beer, soak sorghum or millet overnight, drain, and let it germinate for 2 to 3 days. Dry the sprouted grain, grind it into flour, mix with water, and let ferment for 24 to 48 hours. The wild yeasts and bacteria in your environment will do the work. For a simpler option, try water kefir or homemade kombucha, fermented drinks that provide similar probiotic benefits. While not traditional to Africa, they use the same fermentation principles ancient Africans mastered. Third, drastically reduce or eliminate industrial beverages. No more soda, no more energy drinks, no more fruit juices, which are just sugar water without the fiber. Replace them with fermented drinks, herbal teas, or at minimum, mineral-rich spring water. Your gut will thank you within days. Your energy levels will stabilize. Your inflammation markers will drop. If this information resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. We're working to resurrect food and beverage wisdom that's been deliberately buried, and every subscription helps us reach people who are tired of being poisoned by the modern food system. The ancient African drinking palm wine in the morning wasn't an alcoholic. She was consuming a probiotic-rich, nutrient-dense beverage that hydrated her body, fed her gut microbiome, and provided sustained energy for a full day of work. We traded that wisdom for Coca-Cola and Red Bull. We abandoned drinks that healed for drinks that harm. The answer isn't more pharmaceuticals or expensive supplements. The answer is returning to what worked for thousands of years. Ancient Africans drank fermented beverages daily and lived longer, healthier lives than modern populations drowning in processed drinks. That knowledge wasn't lost. It was stolen, demonized, and buried. And every time you choose a traditionally fermented drink over industrial sugar water, you reclaim a piece of that ancient wisdom. Wisdom that sustained empires, nourished warriors, and kept communities healthy when survival was a daily challenge. Wisdom that still works today. The choice is yours. Subscribe and let's keep uncovering what they tried to erase.